Welcome to This Week in Heresy, Episode 16, The Power of Prayer, a Life Testimony, with our guest, Tanesh Watson Nutall, on location in Oakland, California. Hi, Tanesh. Welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. So for the people that don't know, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself and who you are, and a little bit, and we can start talking about a little bit about your ministry as well.
Okay. Well, my name is Tanesh Watson Nutall, formerly Harvey Watson. I legally changed my name about 3 years ago now. I am a transgender, and I'm a transgender minister at City of Refuge UCC, Oakland. And a little bit about my story. I was raised by my great-grandmother from birth until 12 years old. From 12 to 18, my mother's sister took over, and she was very Pentecostal. And she noticed at a young age with me that I was feminine, and she didn't like it.
Right.
So she used to literally tease me about being feminine. And she told me that God didn't love me, basically, because I was gay and being homosexual was a sin.
Right.
So that's basically how I came up. However, right before I turned 18, my aunt took me to a non-denominational church. And that's actually where I met Christ for myself.
Awesome.
It was very unusual because of the guy's name was Pastor David T. DeMola. I will never forget it. And this was in New Jersey, and he was preaching, and all of a sudden he literally stopped the service, and he said, "There's somebody here that needs Jesus." And next thing I know, an usher was standing on the side of me. He said, "He's talking about you." So I went up to the front of the church, and it was a huge church. And he started praying. He started speaking in tongues. And right before he literally touched me, I went out. They call it being slain in the spirit. And
Right.
I went out. And I remember laughing. I remember at that moment, I laughed, and I felt like a weight was really lifted off of me. And then I started speaking in tongues.
Oh, wow.
And that, for me, was the evidence of the change. However, being that I didn't graduate till I was 18, I was still living with my aunt, and immediately she was like, "Well, Harvey," because my name was that at the time, "you're gonna have to do this, and you're gonna have to do that, and the friends you hang out with, and all of this stuff." And I remember one day I was on my way to school, and she called me upstairs and said, "Harvey, God told me," and this was literally her words, "God told me that since you've given your life to him, if you would go on a fast for 3 days, he would deliver you from homosexuality." And at the time, I believed her, and I think the only reason that I actually did believe her is because, one, I had an older gay brother. He was passed from HIV in 1990, but he was my best friend, and he didn't live with me. So, like on the weekends or whatever, I would go to my other grandmother's and hang out with him, and it was like we understood each other, and with him, I felt normal. And with my aunt, I felt wrong because that's all I heard. And so I believed her, and I went on this fast. And literally on the third morning of the fast, I really wasn't, I guess you would say, paying attention. And I ran upstairs and I grabbed an apple. And right before I bit it, my aunt looked at me and she said, "I knew you didn't want to get delivered."
Oh, wow.
And from that moment on, it was like from 18 well into my adult life, I kind of stayed away from church. I always had a sense of really knowing that, okay, God, I know you saved me, but am I supposed to change?
Right.
And because of the churches and things that I was involved with, I knew that Tanesh wasn't welcome, because I ended up graduating, and I ended up joining the National Guard.
Oh, wow.
And the only reason I did that was because my aunt told me, she said, well, I was a BC student, average, and she told me, well, your grades aren't good enough to go to college, so don't even think about college.
Oh, wow.
And if you're gonna live here, you're gonna have to get a job. And I felt like, you know what, I'm 18 years old, I don't wanna live here anymore. So I joined the National Guard, and the honest reason that I did it was because I felt I needed to prove something to my family. I felt like I needed to be the boy that they thought I was supposed to be. But deep down inside, I knew that I didn't really want that.
Right.
But it was a thing of not wanting it for myself, but wanting it to please them.
Right, right.
So I joined, and I was there for about eight or 9 months when my feet started giving me problems because of the combat boots. I am literally flat-footed, and if I'm in a flat shoe all day, my feet kill me. So they decided, the National Guard decided that it was they gave me two options. One, they would do an operation where they took bone from out my hip and put it in to build an arch, or two, I can get medically discharged and have minimal benefits. And I chose to get medically discharged. One, because I had saw what the Army, National Guard life was, and the push-ups and the running and all of that.
Right.
It was, how should I say? It wasn't something that I wanted to do because I really didn't want to build muscle mass. You know, I always, even in the Army, I was feminine, and some of my drill sergeants knew, some of my comrades at that time knew, and some of them teased me, but at the same time, I was truly all I could be in the Army. And the things that I could get away with, I got away with. But at the same time, I remember right before Christmas, right after Thanksgiving, they let us actually come home for Christmas. And I had to be back the day after New Year's. I remember that. And I spent that time with my brother. I remember he took me to a gay bar. Because my first gay bar, I was literally 12 years old when I went to my first gay bar. He snuck me in, and, so I had that experience, and I ended up meeting my very first, I would call her today, because I know different terms, a drag queen. Right. And then I also met my very first transgendered person that same night. But getting back to me in the Army, he took me to the Army. I mean, he took me to a gay bar, and I went there in my Army uniform. Oh, wow. And my brother thought that it was the coolest thing, because to him, I looked like a man, you know. But there were people there at the club. Some of them were offended because like I said, I was very feminine. The type of dance that I did was voguing, and I vogue in my Army uniform. And that's awesome. When it was finally time for me to go back to the National Guard, it was, you know what, I really don't want to do this. And when I was there was a lot of people that literally tried to get out, and they would do all sorts of things, like literally throw themselves down the stairs so they could break their arm, or take their helmets, because the helmet was so tough, and bash it in their knee. And I knew that I did have a way out, because I really did have flat feet. I really do have flat feet. So I chose that, and they gave me a medical discharge, and I knew that I wasn't going to go back to my aunt's house, because I just couldn't live like that anymore. So I ended up going to my grandmother's house, my father's mother. And my father and the rest of my father's side, they were religious, but they were Baptist. And my grandmother, my father's mother was very, how should I say? I knew things bothered her. Like as kids, we knew that there was certain things that bothered her, but she didn't really speak on it. So I actually began to find Tanesh while I was living with my grandmother. Me and my brother would go out to clubs, and I would dress up, and every now and then he would dress up. My brother was a gay boy that mostly went around in guys' garb. But when I put on women's clothes, I felt comfortable. And I felt like this is really the clothes and the heels and all. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And going to the clubs, I was like 18, 19 years old. It changed my life as far as I found out that there were people like me that liked the same sex or guys that like to put on women's clothes, and we all got along, basically. You know, we were in the club dancing, laughing, and it felt like home.
Right.
So shortly after that, I made a decision, you know what, this is what I want to do every day. So little by little, I started changing, and I started letting my hair grow, or I would dye it, or put mascara on, and my grandmother would notice, and she'd look and you know, shake her head a little bit. And I basically, like I said, I found myself there. Then me and my brother ended up getting an apartment together, and that's when my jail stints started. Because my brother was, he's my best friend, but my brother was crazy. He would literally, I mean, if he loved to drive. And back in New Jersey, for whatever reason, people used to just go in the grocery store and leave their keys in the car. And my brother would jump in the car and take the car. So, and I would be with him. And I ended up going to jail behind that. And I ended up actually going to prison because me and my brother broke into one of my grandmother's friends' houses while this woman was on vacation. And I love fur. And she had a mink coat in her closet, and I took it. And then I literally started prancing, because at that time we lived in Metuchen, New Jersey, and I was wearing this woman's coat. And we ended up inviting two of our other gay friends, and they came in and they started taking stuff too. And one of them ended up getting scared because the mama was like, "Where are you getting this stuff?" Make a long story short, he ratted us out. And because they didn't get no jail time, but me and my brother did. Right. And I ended up going to prison for the first time. And I was in Annandale State Prison in New Jersey. And for me personally, it wasn't like any of the prisons that I heard about in California. That was like kind of like a little kiddie camp type thing for me. So I quickly gravitated to the rest of the gay people that was there. I picked up what I would call my first husband there. And, I did like 18 months. Then I got out and had probation, got all that done. Came home, and me and my brother still had our place. And when Cottrell got out, we went and got him, and all three of us lived together. Unfortunately, right before me and my brother got an apartment, we were actually living in what they call a welfare hotel. And they helped us get the apartment. And this was literally October 31st, 1986. We went out for Halloween. And we were dressed up and everything, but it ended up raining. And my brother caught pneumonia. Oh my. And that's when we found out that he was HIV positive, and he ended up having sarcastic pneumonia. And my brother, I remember he got sick a couple of days after Halloween. He went into the hospital 2 days before Thanksgiving, and he came out 2 days before Christmas. Oh, wow. And he checked himself out. Really? He was like, you know what, I'm tired of this. I don't want to be here. So he came out shortly after that. That's when we ended up getting the apartment, picked up Cottrell because his prison was over, and all three of us lived together. And I ended up working for the county, and I was in charge of 13 different people dealing with their checks, basically, and doing like social work type thing with them.
Right.
My brother ended up getting sick.
Right.
And one day I went to work, and when I came home, my brother was laying across his bed diagonally. Or he used to love to like shower or bathe, and then he would literally just go in his bed and lay there for a couple of minutes naked. So I was used to that. But this was during my lunch break, and usually my brother would have lunch ready for me when I got home. And,
right.
Because I worked right down the street from my apartment. And this particular day, he didn't, but he was just laying there. And his room was downstairs, mine was up, so I ran upstairs, used phone, all that. And when I came back down, he was still laying there. And I felt like something was wrong. So literally, when I walked into his bedroom, as soon as I crossed the threshold, I felt different. And I knew something was wrong. So when I walked around the side of the bed and looked at him, his eyes had rolled back, but he was still alive because they were fluttering and everything. And we ended up getting an ambulance there, rushed him to the hospital, and they hooked him up to all these machines and all this stuff. And the doctors ended up telling me, oh, well, he's stable, and if we have any changes, we'll call you. So the next morning, because I didn't get a call, I went to work. And soon as and Cottrell ended up getting a job at the same place that I was. And as soon as we pulled up in the driveway, my boss was standing out there. And by this time, I had started using Tanesh as my name.
Right.
But my boss, like when she was really serious with me, she would say, Harvey. So when I get out the car, she said, Harvey, I need you to come into my office immediately. We need to talk. And I knew something. I was like, maybe I missed, or maybe, you know, because I used to literally have to issue out people's checks. Like, I know I did everything I was supposed to do. So me and Cottrell, we go to her office, and the first thing she asks me was, are you prepared for your brother's death? And I jumped up out the chair, and I'm like, why would you say that? I said, my brother, he'll be, because she knew he was in the hospital.
Right.
Oh, he'll be fine, and he's fine. And she was like, calm down, calm down. And so I calmed down. She said, baby, your whole family is at the hospital, and they want you there. So go on. I ended up leaving, going to the hospital, and I remember going to the front desk, and the lady was like, well, who are you? I'm like, I'm Harvey Watson, and James Watson's my brother, and I'm here to see him.
Right.
So I get on the elevator, and as soon as I get off the elevator, there's like this waiting room, much about this size, and it was packed with my family. And I still didn't really get it. I'm like, why am I here, and why are all of y'all here? And my aunt, my father's sister, and this was one that kind of was like my mother's sister that was just totally against homosexuality. And when she found out that my brother had AIDS, it was like, if you come over here, you got to eat off plastic and paper plates and all this stuff. And she was a nurse. But at that time, HIV had just came out. People really didn't understand it. And so I get it today. But back then it was. So anyway, she comes over and she says, Harvey, you don't know, do you? I'm like, no, what? What are y'all doing here? And she said, come on. And they took me down the hall and brought me to my brother's room. And the very first thing I saw was the curtains. They were drawn, and it was about this much space, and he had a toe tag on. And so he passed. And when my brother passed, it felt like I died too, because once again, my brother was my best friend, and he understood me. I was 20. Yeah, because I came out of California when I was 22. I was 21. I was 21 when my brother died. And I was like I said, I was coming into Tanesh, not fully knowing Tanesh, but coming in. And he understood all that. So when he died, I was like, there's nobody that will understand me now. And all during this time, once again, we didn't do church. Every now and then, me and my brother would go, but it was basically I stayed away.
Kind of like the Christmas New Year's thing.
The only two things from church that I held on to was the fact that I love gospel music.
Right.
And when I prayed in tongues. And I prayed in tongues because I heard at a real young age that praying in tongues is a uninterrupted prayer between myself and God, that Satan or anybody else cannot break that barrier.
Right.
And I believed that. So all through that, I prayed in tongues. Shortly after my brother died, I ended up really like being lost. And one of my cousins, which was a drug addict at the time, and I didn't really know what being an addict was. I knew he used drugs, but I ended up getting a different job actually. And he came to my job one day, it was on a Friday, and he says, Harvey, I need to borrow $20. I need to go get a cookie. And I'm like, a cookie? What is that? And what kind of cookie are you getting for $20?
Right.
But I gave him the money because I was curious. So he goes and gets it, and he says, okay, this is what this is, and we gonna smoke it and get high. And I had never done it, but it was crack, but back then they called it cookies because it was about like this big, and you break the piece. Make a long story short, we ended up, because he didn't have a crack pipe, we ended up pulling off to the side of the road, and he got a Coca-Cola can, punched holes in it, put some ashes on it, and then put the crack on top, and we hit it out of the opening of the can. And I noticed that when he was doing it, his eyes would sparkle, and it looked like he was really enjoying it. But every time it was my turn to do it, I didn't feel nothing. So he says, okay, well, you know what, this ain't working. This is what I'm gonna do. He had money because he had just won a lawsuit. He was in a motorcycle accident. He didn't want to go to the bank, but it was like, since I gave him my $20, he said, we gonna go. He went and drew out some money. We drove to New York, brought a whole bunch of dope, rented a room, and got high. Wow. And that was literally my first experience with drugs. And to be totally honest, it was a slightly sexual thing with my boy first cousin. He knew that I was the way I was, and we was getting high. And part of me blames it on the fact that we were using drugs, because today, under normal circumstances, I don't think my cousin would, but that was different. However, I really enjoyed that feeling, and I began to chase it. And I began to chase it. It looked like more than even him. It was like every bit of money I got went to that. And I was working, and like I said, I didn't really know about addiction, and I didn't feel like I was like I had a problem.
Right.
Because once again, I was still praying in tongues, even though I didn't go to church.
Right.
And I was kind of sort of maintaining, even though all my money was going there. I lived with my grandmother, and it wasn't like she was gonna put me out or anything like that.
Right.
Every now and then she'd be like, Harvey, you need to give me some money for whatever.
Right.
And so I began to smoke crack. And it was at first only on the weekends when I got paid. Then it literally took off to where if I saw some money laying around the house, I would take it. And so money started missing, jewelry started missing, and I would get blamed, but all of my cousins during this time ended up smoking, all of us.
Right.
We were all the same age group, and we all ended up smoking. And for me, it was a freedom, because one, like I said, I lived with my mother's sister, and that side of the family was very religious, and they downed everything I did. Now on this side of the family, on my father's side of the family, the aunts and uncles would drink,
right,
And that was acceptable, and dominoes and cards and parties. And the younger ones, us, we started smoking crack, marijuana and stuff like that. So I was finally accepted, and I felt like this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. And like I said, it was shortly after my brother's death. However, what ended up happening for me was I enjoyed crack, but I was still living in the same apartment where, you know, my brother and I would walk past the room and I would see his body at times and all of this. And then my brother, another brother of mine, which was still older because I'm the baby, moved in with me and Cottrell, and he brought his girlfriend, and he was on crack, but she wasn't. Then he started taking my stuff, and I was like, you know what, I can't do this no more. So I called my mom, and I was like, Mommy, I don't know what to do. My mother lives in California. She said, well, baby, if you want, you can just pack up and come out here and stay with me. So I'm like, are you serious? She knew Tanesh. Out of respect for the family, I didn't go to my brother's funeral in drag, but I was like half and half type. You know, not fully, because I had on a feminine top, but I had on some slacks and some boys' shoes. And but my mother knew. And she was like, you come out here with me and Paul is my stepdad. And so I'm like, I talked to Cottrell about it, and he was like, well, if that's what you want to do. And my brother Kenny agreed to just go ahead and take over the apartment. So we brought a bus ticket and came out here. And we got out here, and I slowly had to kind of revert to being Harvey again, because my mother knew, but my stepfather didn't. And when he found out, Paul loved me, but he didn't understand. So it was like, if you're gonna live in my house, and they went to church too. You know, it was like, if you're gonna live in my house, the neighbors is talking and la, 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 so you can't do this. And I said, okay. So I started going to their church, and then the pastor found out that I could sing, and I was part of the praise team and that whole thing. And I loved being in the church. I loved being a part of the praise team, because I felt like, you know, I'm part of ministry and all of this stuff. But at the same time, I didn't feel like, and they knew that I was gay. They knew it. You know, the pastor knew, and he prayed over me and all this stuff. But it was, we're working with Harvey. Harvey's a work in progress type thing. So I still didn't feel accepted. You know what I'm saying? I always felt like, even though, you know, I know the Spirit is moving, and I believe the Spirit even moved to me when I would sing and all this stuff, you know, and people would, oh, your voice and all of this stuff. Oh, you got the anointing. But I couldn't really be who I was with them.
Well, it's like what's kind of typical for a lot of those churches is that, you know, if you're gay, God hates you.
So, and at that time, I was, once again, like I said, I was still smoking crack. I would go to church on, you know, Sunday morning, and then I'd come home and lock myself in the room, me and Cottrell, and smoke. And my mother really didn't know. At that time, she didn't know. But what ended up happening, Cottrell started getting on my nerves. And because Cottrell was bisexual. And it was like, he wanted me, but he also wanted to be with girls in Compton. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not having this. So I literally went to the parole office, and because he wasn't supposed to leave, and I told him that he was at my mama's house, and because of the type of crime he committed, it was horrible, because shortly after I reported it, he ended up getting a job, and shortly after I reported it, by the time I got home, there was police cars in front of my mother's house. Helicopters was flying over, and this was in Compton, California.
Oh, Lord.
So the police ended up taking him. They expedited him back to New Jersey. He went back to prison, and I was in Compton, California by myself now.
And
by this time, like I'd gotten a job, and I was smoking in my mama's home, but like I said, she didn't really know. I would keep it kind of under wraps, but it began to escalate because I felt like the only time I felt really normal was when I was smoking crack.
Right.
So it became, literally, it became an everyday type thing. And the first person that picked up on it was my stepdad, because they used to buy cartons of cigarettes. And I used to take a couple of packs of cigarettes, and then I would take a couple of the DVDs and go right around the corner to the Mexicans and sell them. And little by little, they started noticing things coming up out the house. So my stepdad, he asked me one day, and I was like, well, yeah, I smoke, and there ain't nothing to it, and la, 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 and all this stuff. And they rode me downtown Los Angeles at night one day, and I saw all these people out in the street. They was flicking lighters. And I was like, something must be going on, because the only time I saw stuff like that was when you was at a concert. People too.
Right.
But they was actually outside smoking crack. And he was right. He was like, you see this? You see that? These people live out here. They live on the street. You see these tents? This is what you want to end up? And I'm like, no, and all this stuff. But the very next day, my bags was packed, and they brought me back downtown in the morning and said, get out the car. You're not coming back until you get yourself together. My mom said, you know I love you. She said, but you're driving a wedge between me and my husband. And she had been married to Paul for years.
Right.
So I left. I had a lot of resentment. I was alone and in downtown Los Angeles.
Oh my goodness.
I ended up going to the Los Angeles Mission, which was a Christian recovery home. And once again, I had to start being little gay boy Harvey. But I'm in their Christian place. That literally ended up giving me a 32 stint recovery bout thing, in and out of recovery homes. You know, I've been in over 32 recovery homes in Los Angeles, and I've been in and out of these recovery homes at least 63 times, literally. And my life was just quickly in a downward spiral, you know. But once again, I held on to praying in tongues.
That seems to have been
that was consistent.
The bright light that just kind of kept you alive.
That was very consistent from that moment that I really knew at 18 that I was saved. That was the only thing that I held on to.
Right.
And this was during my very last recovery home. I met Pierre. We were both in the program, and at this particular place, they allowed me to be Tanesh. This was my first recovery home that allowed me to really, because there was other trans people there. By this time, you know, the word transgender was already out and all this stuff. So I was in this recovery home, and I really wanted to get clean.
Right.
But at the same time, I knew that I wanted a relationship. And me and Pierre met, and he was liking me, but there was another transgender there, and he kind of liked her too.
Right.
So we were back and forth in the program. And one day, because I actually worked in the office in the program, he called me and was like, Tanesh, I think I'm going to be with Alexis. And I said, look, I said, Pierre, I don't let nobody play with my feelings. I said, I will go out there in that weight pile and get a weight and bash you in your head. And he laughed at me on the phone.
Right.
I hung up the phone. I went out to the weight pile. The people was using the weights. I said, okay. And we were literally stationed in Long Beach. It was SAF, Substance Abuse Foundation in Long Beach. And we were in houses, real upstairs, downstairs houses that they had brought. So my house was right across the street from his house, and I knew that he was in there. So I storm up in the house, and people was like, "You can't be in here. You don't live in here," and all this. I'm like, "Shut up," and all this stuff. I picked up, he'll tell you this is true, I picked up the fire extinguisher from off the wall.
Oh, no.
And I came charging. I knew exactly where his room was, and I came up in there, and I'm holding this fire extinguisher, and I'm like, "I love you, and you play with my emotions, and I don't let nobody do that." And he came to me and when I was doing it, and he said, "If you can't stop yelling, I'm not going to talk to you." So I'm still yelling, and he turns around, and I literally almost bashed him in the head with this thing. And what had happened was somebody else see me, and as I was getting ready to swing, the guy grabbed me, and Pierre turned around, and then I saw the fear in his eyes. I was like, "This child is crazy." Shortly after that, he was like, "You know what? I think you really do love me, don't you?" Really? This is really the way it happened. Right. I said, "Pierre, yes, I do." And the thing is, though, after all of that, because of the violence, me and him, we got busted, basically. They brought us in front of the staff people and all this stuff. And in a program, you're not supposed to be in a relationship anyway.
Right.
So they put us on restriction. We weren't allowed to talk to each other, none of that. But we found our way. We ended up buying cell phones, and we would talk to each other on the cell phone. And what happened was, during the time that we were in the program, Pierre's daughter got pregnant. And she came up. I ended up meeting her. She knew that we were together, and she was like, "Daddy, I like her," and all this stuff, and that made me feel good. And so Pierre decides, he says, "You know what? Pam's pregnant. She's going to need our help. Let's leave." And we were 6 months into our relationship in the program. So we left. And we packed up our clothes, left, went downtown Los Angeles. We were on the Blue Line train. And while we were on our way from Long Beach to downtown Los Angeles, Pierre said, "Tanesh, I need to tell you something." I said, "What?" He said, "It's always been a fantasy of mine to be with a transgender and have some dope and freak." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." And because I love to smoke crack, I was like, "Okay." And so literally, we left the program, immediately went and brought some dope, went to the Cecil Hotel, and started smoking crack. And oh my God, from that day, literally until 5 years ago, we smoked crack together every day.
Wow.
I have a book. One of these days I hope to publish. I have a book at my house right now of the first 6 years of our relationship. The on and off. We never ended up going back to a recovery home. Well, yes, we did. We ended up going back to a recovery home together. And we both got clean together for about 8 months. No, 10 months, because this program, while you were in it, it made you save money. And then it was also a thing to where they would help you get Section 8. And we had got to that level. The Section 8 people came to see us. We put it in Pierre's name, and we ended up getting our first apartment through Section 8 in North Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
And literally, before we even brought any furniture up in there, I'll never forget this, the first night, we was up in there in the back room, in the bedroom, smoking crack until wee hours of the morning. And neither one of us, we knew that there was a love, because I prayed for Pierre to be in my life while we were still in the program. And what had happened was I ended up praying, I ended up speaking in tongues, but the prayer was so intense. I had never in my life prayed like that before. So when I came out of that, I was talking to one of the other trans that was in the program with me, and I was telling her about the experience and everything. And she said, "Well, Tanesh, God answers prayer, and I think this is the one you're really supposed to be with." So, like I said, we left and all this. And all of those years, Pam ended up having the baby. She had another baby. And we were still smoking. We wasn't much help to her. We had met some people that hooked us up with the pill industry, and we started selling pills. And the first 6 years was just horrible. He actually decided, this was after Pam's second baby, Denise.
Right.
It was like we weren't there for the birth, we weren't there for her, smoking crack. Now we're in debt with a lot of the dealers and all of this stuff. And Pierre said, you know what, Tanesh, I don't want to live like this no more. I don't even want to be in Los Angeles. I said, well, where would you go? Where would we go? He said, well, I've always wanted to go to San Francisco. And I said, really? And he said, well, yeah, San Francisco is the gay capital of the world. That's what they were calling it at that time. Right. So I'm like, well, I love you. I don't want to be without you. And even though we were doing what we do, I know that you love me and you accept me. So it's like, okay, come on, let's go. We ended up literally, we didn't even call Section 8. Right. We left the apartment fully furnished. Didn't tell nobody. We packed a couple of things, put it in the car, and we ended up going to Pam's house. And we stayed with her for the rest of that month. And what had happened was, in between that time, we were talking to Pam, and she was like, Daddy, I don't want you to go to San Francisco. You'll be so far away, and I got 2 kids, and la, 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 la. So he was like, okay, we'll try it again. We ended up getting an apartment in Compton, literally right in the next building from where I started out in Compton with my mom. My mom had been moved from that place, but my brother, this is how we got the apartment. My brother lived in the building so long, he ended up becoming the manager. We ended up getting a 2-bedroom apartment in Compton, started furnishing it. We were still smoking, but because we were so close to my brother and my brother and my mother, my oldest brother and my mother, it's like, they never cut the strings. And my brother is with my mother every single day, but he knows about addiction. So my brother would come over to the house early in the morning and knock on the door, and the first thing he would do was look at the carpet. And if he saw Brillo, you know, because like when you're cutting Brillo, if you buy a Brillo pad and you start cutting it, it shaves. And that's what we would have to use to put it in the crack pipe. And he'd see all this Brillo, and he'd call my mom, and then my mom would just pop up at my house. And so now it's like, you know what, we can't live here either. We can't live here and smoke crack. It ain't gonna work. So yeah, we gotta come back to San Francisco. Well, we gotta go. We came out here, and right before we left, we decided to go to the Gay and Lesbian Center in Hollywood out there. And they gave us 2 churches. They said, when you get there, there's these 2 main churches that I know would welcome you guys. One of them was Glide, and the other one was City of Refuge. Of course. And so we get out here, and we find Glide just like that. And we started going and everything, and Glide just wasn't doing it for me. I have to really be honest about that. I mean, Cecil and Jan and the congregation, I felt welcome when I went. I truly did, but I needed more. And so now it's like we're looking for City of Refuge, and we had been in San Francisco for about a month and a half, and we'd heard some people that said they knew where it was, and it was like, oh, it's on Howard Street, you can't miss it. And I don't know why we could not find it, literally. And one we were living on 6th, and like right between Howard and Market. Right, so you were right there. Yeah. And what happened was literally one day, it was a couple of days after we had been smoking, been up for like 3 days. It was a beautiful day. We decided to go for a walk. And usually when we walked, we would always go away from Howard across Mission and Market into the Tenderloin.
Right.
This particular day, we decided to come up and go down toward Folsom and walk over in that area and see. And we was walking, and all of a sudden, we was literally right there in front of City of Refuge, the blue building. And I happened to look up, and I saw it. Right. I said, Pierre, this is it. This is the place that everybody was talking about. And it was open that day because, I don't know if you knew, but like City of Refuge, Magic Johnson Clinic used to be there.
Oh, that's right.
In the front part.
That's right, yeah.
So we go in. And that's also when the Magic Johnson Clinic was on this side, but they also literally had the Ark of Refuge.
Right.
And we knocked on the door, and Amber came and opened the door, and she welcomed us in, and I'm like, hi, my name is Tanesh, and we just moved here, and people have been telling us about City of Refuge, and we just wanted to find out. And she was like, well, this is the Ark of Refuge, and this is what we do, and la, la, la. And then she asked me, she said, are you transgender? And I said, yes. And then she said, well, so am I. And she said that really loud, awesome. You know? And so I was, and then she says, and I go to this church. This is my church, and we have meetings and la, la, la. And she started inviting me and Pierre. And then she invited us that Sunday. She was like, next Sunday, we're doing something. And she invited me, long story short. Yeah. So we came, and I ended up meeting Bishop and Bobby Jean and just Bobby everybody. Jean, And Bobby Jean, she came running up to me, and she was like, you know what? You're going to be my project. You going to be my project.
So her.
And the thing is, when I first came to City of Refuge, because I was a crack addict, crack also led me into prostitution. I had kind of left that out, but crack led me into prostitution. Right. So my entire wardrobe was stuff that I would prostitute in. But I really wanted to come to church. So that first, like I said, that first Sunday I came, and I don't remember exactly what I had on, and I sat on the fourth row from the front. That's where I always sit. That's right there. And about 2 or 3 Sundays after going, me and Pierre joined. And Pierre quickly jumped into becoming an usher. It was like, if I'm going to be in this church, I want to do something. So we started ushering. And Bobby Jean, like she said, I became her project. She would call me. I'd go over her house after church, and we'd have conversations and things. And, by this time, it was like, you know what? I had found a church that I could be Tanesh and be all of Tanesh. And God just started working with me. I started literally having different experiences on Sundays at City of Refuge. And, but we were still smoking crack. And it was 2010 watch night service. Me and Pierre decided to come. And usually on New Year's, we would go, we'd get some, well, he would get some drink because I didn't drink. But we would buy a whole lot of crack. And that's how we brought the New Year in. And like this year, it was like, you know what? Let's try this. Let's go to church. Because I remember as a kid, I used to do the watch night service thing. So we came to City of Refuge 2010 watch night service. And that's really when my life changed. I'll never forget, I went up, Bishop was preaching and the singing and all this stuff. And right at the closing, she had a prayer call. And I remember going up to that altar. And by this time, I was done. I was so tired of the crack lifestyle, and I could see what it was doing to me and Pierre's relationship. We would literally fight and got physical at this particular time. And it wasn't him. I was the abuser. Because crack made me real angry. I was, oh my God. And I lashed out on him. And so this watch night service, like I was so tired of living like that. And I cried out to God. And I'm like, I don't want this for my life no more. And from that day, all the way until this, life has never been the same. How should I say? I'm being honest. I honestly believe that an anointing fell upon me that night that literally changed my life. We both stopped smoking crack immediately.
Wow.
We ended up getting 6 months, together. And I had got involved with Intercessory Prayer through Paul and Seville. And my own personal prayer life had begun to develop. It became, because at first it was just the thing of, okay, I'm doing this on Sunday, they asked me to do. And I know that I'm a prayer, I love to pray. And like I said, I pray in tongues. But then my own prayer life started to develop at home. And me and Pierre started to pray together in our home. And I began to, we began, other people started joining our life either through City of Refuge or because I'm also, both of us are medical marijuana patients. And through that collective and like doing work with them, different people started entering my life. And we started inviting these people into our home. And some of them were just not supposed to be there because after they would leave, a presence would still be in our home.
Yeah, I understand.
And we began to read books about stuff like that and ask different pastors here about stuff like that. And that ended up developing our prayer life at home together. But God was still working with me, and I wasn't sure of where it was actually going.
Well, I mean, you recently got installed as the chaplain, the transgender chaplain. And I think, listening to you talk about your life today and how much City of Refuge helped you, it seems like transgender ministry in general, I mean, I don't think it really matters what religion you are, but an open, welcoming, accepting transgender ministry really does save lives, literally will save a life.
Yes. Because like I said, Bobby Jean literally became my mentor.
Right.
And things just started changing, the way I dress, the way I think, my interactions with other people at City of Refuge. I ended up, under request, I ended up started coming to the ministers' meetings. And then I started taking different classes that Refuge Institute was offering and getting different certificates and stuff. And this was literally it was a couple of months before the new year when Bobby Jean passed. I had met with her because I had really started getting involved with the trans ministry. And under Bobby Jean. And so when she passed, that it was another shift in my life. Because with Bobby Jean, I kind of felt like I did with my brother. We became friends. Bobby Jean was literally the very first transgender minister that I had ever met. And because of her realness, it allowed me to be real. Shortly after that, still while she was with us, I accepted my call. I began to realize that, okay, God, this is where God wants me, but I am a prayerful person. And that began to blossom and groom to the point to where Bishop started noticing. And the first time I worked with Bobby Jean, when we had our summit, that's when I was told that leadership skills started to be developing within myself. And with that particular thing, I'm still top flip. I'm not sure.
I think you're doing
I've heard people say this, and I'm like, okay. But I guess that's how should I say, well, to be honest, the insecure side of me that at times still rises. However, shortly after Bobby Jean's passing, well, literally, it happened at the memorial.
Right.
Day of the memorial. It was another shift because a different type of anointing fell at that service.
Yeah, it did.
And it hit myself, it hit Quentin, and it hit Alexis. And it was strange because none of us were, how should I say, we weren't close with each other. We knew, of course, we knew each other, and we greeted each other in church.
Yeah.
But on the outside, we were all kind of like separate.
Right.
And that brought all of us together. So I started working, and I felt like when Bobby Jean passed, it was, for me, it was, you know what, God, I said yes to you. And whatever that means for me, I'm willing to do. So that's when I actually really started literally diving into the trans ministry and the meet and greets, because I felt like, being trans and going to a lot of trans female meetings that did not that didn't include my brothers.
Right.
I had come to a point to where it's like, all we're doing is talking about the same things. And I felt like, if we're going to be in community, my community, especially my church family, we have to be together. I can't have my brothers over here and we're all discussing one thing, and this girls is over here and this discussing another thing, and there's no unity. Yeah. So I began to speak to that vision with different pastors here. Yep. And it got back to Bishop, and it was like, we release you. Do as God leads you guys to do. So I ended up sponsoring, or however you would call it, setting up the very first male-female trans meet and greet at City of Refuge. And that was a mind blower for me, because when I found out that I helped start the very first one, I was like,
it's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Me? And I looked at it, and to be totally honest, it kind of set me back to a certain extent, because I looked at that and I allowed my head to start talking to me, to be totally honest.
I understand that.
It was, you know where you came from, and you're doing this, and if these people knew, and they don't know everything, and all of this stuff. So that's when my life began to open up as far as Facebook is concerned. Because by this time, I was into like my third year of recovery. Life was showing up. And different challenges within ministry and just within life in general just started coming. So I really began to develop different relationships with people here at City of Refuge, because I wanted to know, and for me, it began to move outside of the transgender ministry. And what I mean by that is my main focus was still with the transgender ministry. And for me, it was more so the unity of having the male and the female together, and we're learning together. So I began to literally start visiting different groups in the city, picking up different information, started visiting different healthcare providers, picking up information from them, and bringing it back here and sharing it. And that just kind of took off, and then we decided that, you know what, I love to pray. And let's see if we can get a trans led or sponsored prayer call. So myself and a brother out of Sacramento hooked up, and we decided to start a transgender prayer call.
Yeah, I have that listed on the calendar.
So, and that we've been doing this for at least 6 months now. Got the exact date, but about 6 months.
That's
and
awesome.
Lives have literally been changed. People have, we called in and you guys prayed for us. And we know that even if we don't have a verbal prayer, we know that someone is praying still.
That's awesome.
And it became a every Saturday thing. And it helped me, and it helped me actually move out of it, because what happened was all of these different things started happening in my life, and they were all good things. And I really didn't know exactly how to digest it.
Right.
Being very new to ministry, wanting to always be true to self and to be true to others, at times became somewhat of a challenge.
Yeah.
Because I decided that, you know what, okay, and especially when I found out that, like I said, there was an anointing that fell during Bobby Jean's memorial.
Yeah.
Myself,
I felt
Quentin,
that too.
Myself, Quentin, and Alexis started just talking amongst ourselves. You know, and that's literally with the way it started. Us three started talking amongst ourselves and was like, Bobby Jean ain't here no more. Transgender ministry still needs to go on. What are we gonna do? And we started working together.
And if not you, then who, right?
Yeah. And so, like I said, things started taking off, and Quentin started doing the men's group here, and then we wanted a Bible study, and Alexa was like, okay, I'll run that. We're still working on that now to try to get someone to fill that spot. Yeah. But life has literally just changed, and I honestly believe that it goes all the way back to my root of my aunt, even though, you know, and I can honestly say this today, even though my aunt teased me and said the different things that she said, I know that she loved me, and I know that she felt and still feels that she was right. And it allowed me to look at people, their religious practices, their beliefs, and to really, I've always heard this term, you know, agree to disagree and still love, and you know, and if you're not in a situation, that phrase is easy to just spill out your mouth. Yeah, definitely. But it taught me to love everybody just because, you know, and to learn how to pray without judgment. Yeah. Just because.
Well, and you never know who you're going to help.
Literally.
And, you know, you could be praying for somebody.
Even with my God, I can be totally honest, because I think I shared this with you before. With yourself and like Queen Mother and all of that. Yeah. City of Refuge is literally what did it for me. Because I'd been in other churches. Growing up, we were told, you know, if a Jehovah's Witness knocks on your door, you turn out the lights, pull the shades, don't open the door type thing. And we were also, I was taught that you don't go to, you know, no fortune teller, and don't let them read. All of that stuff was supposed to be evil. Right. And it was, if you're in, like for instance, Pentecostal, Pentecostal has a set of rules, basically. And, you know, with all of these things, and it was always with me, I looked at it like, who made the Pentecostals or the ecclesiastics, or, you know, what makes them so right and these people so wrong? And I was the type, okay, coming up, because they told me to stay away, I stayed away. But getting into my adult life, and even though I was on drugs, it was like, well, because Pierre, he was raised Baptist,
Right.
But he's studied with Jehovah's Witnesses and did the Buddha thing, all of that.
Right.
So actually, it was Pierre that introduced me to a different way of thinking. And then I came to City of Refuge and I met so many other people that think differently. It allowed me to be able to think differently because I could be totally honest. Yourself, Queen Mother, Roxanne, different practices. If it wasn't for God, it would have been like, you know what, I can't be by you.
Yeah.
So I thank God for breaking that because it opened up doors. It opened up my understanding. And
I get to be your friend.
Yes.
Which is
I'm
awesome.
not so rigid anymore. It allowed me to, and that even allowed ministry to grow in me too, because now it's not about ministering just to trans or just to transsexuals or whatever. I mean, my yes has placed me in a place to where I've been able to just be with any type of person and accept you exactly where you are. And once again, like I said, I take that back to my aunt and the practices that she did instill. I mean, every Monday night she had prayer in the home, and it allowed me to release her because for years, and I kind of think too, even like with my drug addiction, I started all of that because I wanted to be accepted by family, and and forget about things that she said and all this stuff. But I'm grateful today that the things that she taught me about, how should I say? I don't really want to use the word spirituality, but some of those things that she taught benefited my life. Yeah, it did. Well,
it gave you hope.
It really allowed me to move on, and now, just recently actually, I decided that I wanted a relationship with my aunt. It was like, you know what? I've lived in this woman's house from 12 years old until I was 18. Right. Yeah, and I'm 49 now. She's my aunt. There's nothing I can do about it. And I reached out. She didn't reach back. And I had to accept that. And I had to be okay with it. And at first, I wasn't. Yeah. I mean, anger came up, and you're not, and all of the things that I wanted to like spew out. You're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to be religious too, or you're supposed to be saved, and all of this stuff. I had to be like, you know what? Is it really that important? I can love you, and I do believe you love me, but if we never see each other again, I'm still going to be okay. Yep. And it allowed me to move past this right and wrong theology and religion versus relationship type thing. And so today I live my life in relationship. I don't per se, I'm kind of like Bishop with this Metho-Pentecostal thing, you know, and it has opened me up, and I'm so happy about that. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, and I know we could talk forever about this stuff.
Yes.
Maybe I'll have to have you come back on again and talk a little more about it.
I would love to.
Awesome. And so thank you so much for joining us today.
You're so welcome.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you to talk about transgender ministry or any of that stuff, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Get in touch with me through Facebook. Okay. That would be Tanesh Watson Nutall, Facebook.com.
Okay, we'll have a link in the show notes.
They can also get in touch with me, Tanesh Watson 76 at gmail.com.
Okay, we'll put that on the show notes, and I'll put links to City of Refuge as well.
Okay, yes.
Thank you so much, Tanesh.
You're welcome.
I'd like to thank Tanesh for joining us this week. And as always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. There you can also subscribe to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, join our forums, or follow us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast. Thank you so much for listening this week, and we'll see you next time.